healthy food doesn't have to be vegetables and salads, and it doesn't have to be miserable. You can eat healthy, and you can eat well while it being tasty.
Hey everyone, welcome to our podcast, The Bold Tackle. We are your hosts, Sophie Howard and Oliver Howard, and we are ready to tackle bold topics in sport,
highlight the women's football industry,
and speak about the unspoken.
If you are ready to get an insight into what really goes on behind the scenes, join us on our journey and listen in
to The Bold Tackle. Hi, welcome back to a new episode of our podcast, The Bold Tackle. Hi, Soph. Lovely that I'm allowed to be back, and we have a guest. I'm really excited. We've been waiting for this episode for a long time, but we're going to be talking about nutrition today. I'm going to say hi, TJ, but Soph, you introduce him, please.
Yeah, everyone. We finally got him on board. Obviously, as TJ was employed by Leicester, we couldn't get him on the podcast any sooner. But he's embarking on a new journey, so finally we could get him on the podcast. TJ was our nutritionist, was also nutritionist for the Boys Academy, and has had many stations before that. But welcome, TJ. Finally, you're on the board.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Happy to be here. Recently, as Soph said, left Leicester, so got the call up straight away to get on the podcast, and yeah, looking forward to chatting all things nutrition.
So before I think we start talking about Action Nutrition, do you want to just give us a quick update on kind of your station throughout your career, where you started, how you became a nutritionist, and then how you ended up going and soon moving across the world?
Where does this expertise come from?
So I'm still, I'll kind of start at the beginning as most people do, kind of going to university. Well, I think even before that, started with a passion in sports. I think many people that end up working in sport wanted to play sport in their childhood, and ended up not being good enough, and then going on to study at university. So I did the kind of generic sport and exercise science undergrad degree at Liverpool John Moores University. Which was kind of really enjoyable, but those courses are very broad. So along those 3 years, decided I wanted to kind of go down the nutrition route, and then found out if you really want to work in sport, you need to go on to do your further education. And so I went on to study a master's in sport nutrition at Liverpool John Moores University as well. And then off the back of that, kind of started to get my first real practical experience doing an internship with Aston Villa alongside my master's, which then turned into a full-time role with their first team, supporting their head of nutrition, again on a full-time internship. So learned a lot there, did about a year and a half there, got to a point where I could feel like I'd done enough shadowing and learned enough, and then took the jump to kind of take the role on at Leicester with the academy and the women's team about a year and a half ago, so January 2023. So that was my first proper job, really. Internship was good fun, but you're not really responsible for much. So then kind of was thrown into the deep end, like off you go look after a Cat 1 academy and a women's WSL team. So it was very daunting at first, but I've learned a lot and developed a lot at Leicester. Really enjoyed it, and now leaving Leicester, I'm onto a new role out in the Middle East in Doha to work for an academy out there. So still, early doors in the career, but enjoying it so far.
When Soph and I talk on the podcast a lot about developing and getting better at your job, is there a way for you to get better as a nutritionist, or do you need to know the basics and then just tweak it for who you're doing your job?
Yeah, I think everyone comes out of university with that kind of the knowledge, the kind of the book knowledge and the general understanding of those. So I think what makes a good practitioner is the way you can kind of communicate that knowledge to different athletes. And I think what's helped me is working across all the age groups at the boys' academy. So working with 12-year-olds and also working with women's first team players on different days allows you to develop those skills and how you communicate that knowledge to different athletes. And I think being spread so, it's frustrating at times, being spread so thin, but also I think that's allowed me to learn how to communicate with different athletes. And I do think another way to help your development is obviously to work with other practitioners. One of the reasons I was kind of or I'm excited about this new challenge, or a big pull for me, this new role, was actually going to work as part of a team of nutrition practitioners out in the academy I'm going to. So like I said, I am inexperienced. I'm a couple of years into my career, and maybe what I was missing at Leicester slightly was that more experienced practitioners to bounce ideas off, and there was, I think the nutrition world can be quite lonely at times. There's teams of sports scientists, there's teams of physios, there's teams of analysts, whereas the nutritionist is often on their own, which there's pros and cons to it, but I think it's good I'm looking forward to going and being part of a team and work and learn from more experienced practitioners, which I think will help develop me further.
And also breaking boundaries, always having been in the UK, going to Doha, life will be really different. And also the way of eating must be so different there.
I think it is going into the unknown a little bit. And I think I've heard just from some of the guys out there that there's a lot of work to do from that side of things. I think they're probably quite far behind where we are over in this country. So I think it's quite an exciting project to kind of go and get stuck into and see. I think there'll be a really good scope for positive change out there. I think there's probably some quite poor nutrition habits over there. So I think lots of good work to be done. Looking forward to it, kind of jumping a little bit into the unknown, but I do know some of the practitioners out there. So I know I'm going to a setup where it's going to be done properly by top level practitioners. So yeah, it's a little bit daunting, but also I know I'm going into a good, well set up academy with good practitioners.
I have so many different questions for the sports side and also to compare differences. But maybe for the general public, let's start with that. When we look at nutrition, what should we look out for? What should we concentrate for? And what's maybe the things you should eat and definitely not eat?
I think nutrition's it's such a broad area, and there's so many different kind of rabbit holes and like fads you can go into, and there isn't one diet fits all. So a diet for a professional athlete will look different to someone who is a 9-to-5 office worker. So it's not as simple as everyone follow this diet and it will work for them. So a diet for a WSL player will look different to even myself, or working in sport. I'm not an athlete, so I won't necessarily practice what I preach, because I don't need, for example, to fuel up on a match day -1 because I don't have any match days. But I think it is in terms of the general population, I think you can get so caught up in the social media and the supplement side of things and throwing money down the drain. I think it is getting over complicated from that side of things through businesses trying to make money. I'm a big believer in like a food first approach. So I do feel like generally speaking, you can meet all your nutritional needs from a whole food first approach before trying to find trying to go to supplements to help your diet out. And also a believer in like everything in moderation. So when you say what the right and wrong foods to eat, I think generally speaking there aren't any rules and right and wrong foods, but I do believe in moderation and that healthy balance between the like what you eat, but also making sure you're enjoying what you're eating as well.
And also on that side, because this veganism has become very, very big over the last year. We can see it when we walk into the stores. So I think I mentioned on the podcast, I was a vegan in the past. When you walk into stores today, I ate vegan in the past. I think that sounds better. When you walk into the stores today, there's so many different things you can buy. is that really a healthier way of eating?
I think vegan diets can definitely be done in a healthy. I think the problem with a vegan diet is that a vegan diet could be done really poorly. I don't necessarily think just because someone's vegan it makes them more healthy. You could be a vegan, you could eat chips every day, and like ultra processed like corn foods, and you're technically following a vegan diet, but it's a poor, unhealthy diet. So it's obviously there's different ways to do vegan diets. If you're doing a vegan diet and you're planning it out and making sure you're getting all your macro and micronutrients and your protein intakes coming from a range of amino acids, I think vegan diet can be a healthy, nutritious option. It will just take more planning to make sure you're ticking all your boxes. Whereas if you're following a vegetarian or a meat-based diet, I think not one is better than the other. I just think the vegan diet can often be less practical than a balanced diet, which will include meat. But again, I think it comes back to moderation. So I don't think necessarily a vegan diet is better than a vegetarian or a meat diet with meat and vegetables. But yeah, it's just it needs to be considered carefully if you're going to go down the vegan diet route. I would never like, personally, when it comes to athletes, I wouldn't recommend the vegan diet. But if a athlete wanted to do it for ethical reasons, then who are you to argue against that? So then that would, if an athlete came to me and wanted to do a vegan diet based off those reasons, then you would just have to work with them and come up with a more structured plan to follow to make sure they're getting everything they need, which they can do.
But to clarify, are animal products and eating meat bad?
I would say no. I would never say animal products and eating meat is bad. Again, it's moderation. So perhaps if you're having red meat twice a day, 7 days a week, wouldn't recommend it. But it's all about moderation. So if you were to maybe have red meat once or twice a week, and if that's coming from a locally sourced farm, that's going to be better than eating meat 2 or 3 times a day every day from poorer quality sources. So yeah, it can be bad, but it can also be good. So there's always context to these kind of questions. It's never as simple as yes or no answers. But yeah, so I guess I would say no, but it depends how much you're eating, where it's coming from, which will influence that answer, I guess.
So if I'm going to bombard him with questions, if you don't jump in, because we can also jump to the sports side, because you did academy, women, men. Do you have to take different approaches for youth players compared to maybe women and men? And is there something different you need to look out for when doing the nutrition plan for men and women?
Yeah, there's big differences, really. Well, not necessarily big differences. I think the main difference is kind of working from the younger age groups first in the academy. The large focus is obviously on the basics of nutrition, but the big push at that age group is on parent education. At 12, 13, 14, you can give the boys or children that age all the education in the world, but if their parents are the ones that are buying the ingredients, doing the cooking, they have the biggest influence over what the boys are eating. So the main message at the younger age groups is to kind of get across how much energy these boys are burning, and academy footballers are burning, which has been shown to be anywhere between 2.5 up to 4,000 calories on some days, and these are 14, 15, 16-year-old boys. So it's really trying to get that message across to parents of how much energy the boys are burning on top of growing, on top of going to school, and kind of often a good way to show them is what a first team footballer will do in a day, which is probably have a bit of a lie-in, come for breakfast, train, lunch, gym, and go home 2-3 o'clock. Whereas these these children are going to school, probably playing sport at school, running around in the playground, travelling hours to get to the academy in the evening, having a gym session, playing their football session, then probably getting home at 9:30, having been up from 7. So they're no wonder they're burning over 3,000 calories, and then probably only eating or like poor school meals, maybe not having meals on their way into training. Clubs often don't have great food provision for the younger age groups, which is a big thing to work on. So then probably not getting fed as well as the older age groups. On top of that, they're kind of going through their peak height velocity and growing. So you can quickly see how important it is to get the parents to realize how much they need to be feeding their and this will apply to boys and girls in academy football, and there's even less support in women's academy compared to boys academy. So it's really important, I think, at the younger age groups that it's the parents getting that education information, but also I think clubs need to do more to support and give a better food provision to these kind of academy age groups. And then as you move up to the older age groups and the 18s, 21s, and first team, it kind of becomes a more individualized approach. So you'll work on more kind of one-to-one work, perhaps on body composition if players have body comp targets, or match day -1 fueling if players kind of struggle with that, recovery bits, supplement plans. So it will then shift to a more nutrition for performance rather than nutrition for like growing and health. And you're trying to link it more to football and how does nutrition have an impact on performance on the pitch. And more one-to-one approach. So younger down the age groups, there'll be more group work, group presentations, workshops, keeping it fun and light. And then first team, under 21s, under 18s will be more one-to-one and performance related.
And is there a big difference between men and women at the grown-up age?
So there's only recently in the last few years started to be a bit of research done in elite female footballers. So a lot of the recommendations nutritionally transfer across from studies done in males, which I think if we fast forward it to 10 years down the line and we had the same conversation, I think that would look very different. I think there's a lot more research being done now in elite female athletes. I just think traditionally they've been done in men because a man's body is a lot less complex in terms of hormones and time of the month. So if the scientist wants a study done on a group of men, they will, I guess, get more, not more reliable, but maybe
cleaner data.
Yeah, exactly. So if you had the same study done in 10 women, but they're all at different times of their cycle, you might get drastically different results based off the fluctuating hormones. Whereas, in men, it's a lot more straightforward and less complex. But I do think there's a lot more research starting to be done in elite female athletes. In terms of like the energy requirements, there's been some studies done recently which have showed the energy expenditure across like a 10-day camp. I think it was done with the Lionesses, and it showed women on average, elite female footballers will burn around 2,800 calories on average, compared to a first team male footballer burn around 3,500 calories. So about 700 calories difference between what a first team male player and a first team female player will burn.
That study that you just mentioned, TJ, I think we were showing that study as well. I don't know if that was at national team level or with you, but there was a high percentage of female athletes under fueling. Knowing exactly the energy expenditure, there's a large proportion that is under fueling.
Yeah.
First of all, do you think that's like a lack of knowledge, or I think we're fully aware, but we're still under fueling for, I guess, social pressures, pressures to look a certain way that is either external or internal? Where do you think that comes from, and how are we going to battle that? Because Ollie and I had an episode ages ago about body composition, and I just think we're in a vicious cycle of everyone wants you to look a certain way, especially with the increasing visibility of the game, but we're forgetting the actual importance of fueling the right way, even if that means you're 1% higher in body fat, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's an area that's really important to recognise, and these studies are doing a good job in highlighting that. I think it's really important to know what the energy demands are of football, because you kind of work backwards from that. If you know how much energy you're expending, you know how much energy you need to be putting into fuel. And I think if you come at it from a fueling and performance angle, I think that's the way to do it. The body comp one is an interesting one, because you'll know from the body comps we've done at Leicester, it's always linked to performance. Yeah. There is, and we use the kind of the skin fold method, which is far from gold standard, and I make that very clear. And I think Leicester are going to move to the DEXA scan method, which is the gold standard for exact muscle mass percentage, body fat percentage, bone density. So I think when you're using body comp methods like skin folds, they are practical and easy, but I think you need to be really careful around will come from the direction that it's full performance, but it's also individual to you and your scores compared to your scores, because everyone's body's different, and there isn't a magic number of what is a good score or a bad score. So I think it's really important to come out from that angle. Hopefully that's been well received from doing that at Leicester. I think trying to link everything back to performance as much as possible. So when it comes to every meal time and breakfast and lunch at the club, it should be advertised that the food is the fuel for recovering from a training session or fueling for the gym session. But it'd be interesting to know your thoughts, Sophie, on how you think it's developed over the last 5+ years, because I would like to think that as nutrition is becoming more prominent in the women's setup, that maybe things are moving in the right direction, or do you still think it's got a long way to go?
I think we're definitely moving in the right direction. I think in terms of athletes themselves realising how important the right fueling is, I think we've got some ways to go. But I think the development has come from previously knowing, like from when I was growing up, and especially when I was already in senior football, but it wasn't as professional as it is now because the game is growing. We didn't have a nutritionist within our staff. We had the S&C, the sports science, that did the nutrition part. So then when we were doing skin fold, it was, you had and this is really, really bad, but you had a red, amber, green. Like that should never be that way. And all the athletes were compared with one another. And first of all, that's discriminating. And second of all, it's just not performance enhancing, because every athlete of the TJ, of the expert, every athlete functions best or works best under a certain body comp for them, and not what all my teammates are at. I think there was just a lack of knowledge and education, and especially how to communicate that knowledge to the athletes, to emphasize the importance of fueling, because people always in society talk about dieting, but we're not dieting, we're fueling. And people talk about exercise, we're not exercising, we're training. And until there's a shift in mentality about that, and that always has to come from the athletes internally, like how badly do I want to perform at my best? And then I will make that switch, and I'll fuel, and I won't diet, and I'll train, and I won't exercise. I think it's very closely linked to our psychology.
Yeah.
And I think we're absolutely moving in the right direction. And I think, TJ, I'm giving you that feedback, but like you've set the bar really high with the nutritionist we had with you, because I think every athlete, all my teammates, we felt like, first of all, you were looking at us as individuals and not just as a group of athletes. And in terms of body comp, in the past, like people would fear that day. When we get the message online saying, Safe, can you come in at 9 a.m. tomorrow for their body comp? Previously in the past, people used to fear that day, but we understood, and that was passion. How you just portrayed it is like, we understood that was the same as a cattle movement jump, the same as a test jump, the same as a performance indicator on the pitch. It was just one number to help us perform better and to get an idea of where we're at. And I think we've massively moved in the right direction at Leicester, but I'm very, very certain that in many other clubs, in the WSL, but especially in the lower leagues or teams abroad, first of all, they don't have nutritionists, but second of all, I think they're still behind us. So I think at Leicester, we're very privileged with you, and I know you don't like when I praise you, but like someone that comes in now has got like big shoes to fill.
Don't you think, Sophie? You talk about psychological, about realizing what you're doing, but don't you think that's knowledge, and not only knowledge of players that they need to gain through how to fuel for performance, but also for management to understand how important this nutritionist in TJ in the past and someone in future is, but also for staff to realize, and the nutritionist developing of just how you said, TJ, we started with skin fold, now we're going to this new type of measuring performance, and that's knowledge and development. And the men might have it already, but the men had it and had this research for years and years and years, and the women's game has only just started, and was started, a couple of years. You've got so long to go, so much to learn for the nutritionist, so much research to be done to get to this perfection, that it can be a really exciting journey. But everyone needs to be on board to increase this performance and gain this new knowledge.
Yeah, I think there's a foundation, a basic amount of knowledge from the men's game, and also in terms of the general guidelines, they are fairly similar. Obviously, TJ mentioned there's the menstrual cycle, there's the hormones, there's all these other things that where female body is way more complex, and therefore I guess some guidelines have to be adjusted, and that's the point I'll be at, that we need more research, and I think there is research being conducted at the moment, but it'll take a couple of years until we get to that point. But I think one of the biggest things for me that I've learned throughout my career is that everyone, and when I say everyone, that's all the staff, and that's not just the sports, the sports science performance staff, that's technical staff. Everyone in the building has to get away from, you have to look a certain way to play football, you have to look a certain way to perform well. We need to actually get away from that and look at, is this person performing on the pitch? Yes, perfect. Box tick. That's the only box we need to really tick. Obviously, if there's injury prevention, there's all these other things, but if someone is performing on the pitch, don't talk about what they look like. Preach. Both of you
Great
just sitting there nodding.
Great statement. I have a big question, because you've been talking a lot about fueling and calories. Is that the most important measurement and number you need to focus on for athletes?
So I think it's the reason why I've mentioned the fueling and the specific calories from energy expenditure is because if we're going back to that conversation around underfueling, and as Soph said, that study we were talking about earlier had highlighted that there was quite a large percentage of players underfueling or at risk of low energy availability, which is when you're consistently underfueling over a period of time. That then leads to effectively increased injury risk, but a whole host of other health issues. And then for female players, missing menstrual cycles, and then it's basically your body starting to shut down and try and conserve energy because you're expending so much and you're not putting enough in. So I think that is one of the biggest areas to target when coming into a club or a women's team is, are players fueling enough? Because again, well, most importantly for health, but then also that will then have a knock-on effect on performance. And then historically, and there's a bit of a stigma around carbohydrates in general life, but it's not so much of an issue or topic of conversation in the men's game, but it could particularly be one in women's, and the fear of carbohydrates, this stigma around them making you put on body fat and etc. Whereas the key message around fueling is, and for football, is carbohydrates is your main fuel for high intensity exercise. So carbs are your friend, and there's no need to fear carbs. And it's getting that message across. Not only obviously do you need to fuel enough from an overall calorie point of view to support your health and your performance, but specifically carbs are really important when it comes to fueling high intensity work, and football is a high intensity sport.
So the only times they would be bad for you is if you overfuel and you eat too much carbs, and then you have a 9 to 5 like me, in the evening you cut podcasts and you don't really go out and run.
Yeah, so we us two probably need to be a bit more wary around our carb intake, or we'll probably consume less carbs than.
You've already seen my upper half. No, just joking.
Something we try to implement at Leicester, along with the sports science team, is this idea of like carbohydrate periodization. So this fueling for the work required idea, and basically depending on what the demands of the day are. So sports science and technical coaches will periodize their week, bigger days, smaller days, large area days, and basically trying to link nutrition into this. And this is the whole around like linking nutrition to performance. And it's not just something that's kind of on the part, just pushed to the side. It's if you can really bring it into sports science and physical performance, it helps connect that. So we try to add in these little kind of fuel gauges along kind of in the bottom of the physical weekly plan, where Marcus, a sports scientist, would send out the demands of the day. So it's going to be an extensive day, 6 to 7K, lots of high speed running. And then the nutrition plan would link into that. So the night before that day would be a higher carb dinner. So it lets the girls know, right, this is the physical demands for the next day. So the night before, I'm going to eat more carbohydrates, compared to if you've got 2 days off in a row. There might be meals in those 2 days where you can kind of push your protein and your veg intake higher and drop your carbs a bit lower. So it's trying to kind of go meal by meal, and you're always fueling for the demands of what's next, really.
And just to stay on this subject, and this last question for the carbohydrates, but is there like carbohydrates? Do I need to look out for if it's good or bad carbohydrates? Or in this case of just fueling for the next day, doesn't it really matter? Talking about, I don't know, white pasta, brown pasta, or rice or potatoes or whatever.
Yeah, so I think generally if it's the night before and you're fueling for the next day, you probably go, whole grain, higher fiber carbs, just for the health benefits that would come with the fiber for your gut health. And then maybe the morning of that day, then you'll go faster releasing. So you might go for your bagel with your jam, cereal, porridge. But generally speaking, the night before, probably better off going for more of a whole grain carbohydrate option for the extra health benefits that will come with that. But if you're going to have having a bowl of white pasta is also fine as well.
So I would be really interested to get your take on how difficult, because I mean, this is TJ's life and job and whatever. How difficult is it for you to implement everything he requires of you, on top of training, on top of being mentally sane, on top of having a personal life?
I think there's two things. The first thing, this is what TJ mentioned, is the balance. I think I follow TJ's plan 80-85% of the time. There is times where I don't follow it, but me having the plan gives me a guideline of, if I'm doing it perfectly, this is what I should do. And most of the time it actually aligns with kind of what I want to do anyways, if that makes sense. And then the second thing is, I think, how much you want it. For me, when it comes around game day, I'm 100% following the plan. It's match day -1, match day +1. The other days are a bit like, as I said, 85%. Most of the time I follow it. Sometimes there's a birthday, so it should be a light carb. I'm going out and I'm having a pizza. But that for me is important, because that's me balancing my personal life as well. And I think that's the only way I've been able to keep sane for 15 years of playing football at the highest level. Because otherwise, you go into a cycle and everything is so strict. If you follow it 100%, then everything's really, really strict, and you just go insane about trying to be perfect. And I think for me, it's worked out really well. First of all, I'm interested in nutrition. I'm interested in wanting to be my best. I'm also getting to an age where I really, really have to look after my body. So everything I can take from TJ that makes me, or allows me to continue my career for as many more years as I want to and can. That's why I follow the plan. But absolutely, as TJ said, it's about balance, about moderation. And he's mentioned that word many times, and that's with everything in life. It's about moderation. And there's also not a sole good and bad. There's this day it'd be better, this day it wouldn't be as great.
Yeah, can I just add into that? Yeah, I'm not a believer in strict diet plan. So if a player asks for a strict diet plan, I kind of push back against it, because I could go meal by meal for 7 days, but you might not want to eat that on Wednesday night or eat that for lunch on Thursday. So I'm more about educate, give some options, but then let the player choose. And if Soph comes in and says, I like the fact players can come in and say, I had a pizza on this day, because they're not going to get told off for it. That is part of eating across a week, that there are meals. And I think you're right, it's like it's 80-20 approach. So if you're 80% of the time you're on it, then that allows you've got to have that 20% of the time where you can go out and enjoy yourself.
You'd be surprised, Ollie. Like, the question I get from everyone when they meet me is, oh my God, do you have a strict diet plan you follow every day? That's literally the first question they ask about being a professional football player. It's not how many times you train. It's not kind of what you do in training. It's always about the food and, like, do you have to follow a strict diet plan? And my answer is always like, no. Like, I can do what I want, really, if I want to do it to my body. But obviously I want to perform, so therefore I follow the guidelines as much as I want to.
It's this extra 1% change. And I think, TJ, as you said, I think that's the only way of having a successful plan and keeping at it. Because we all know when we go to the gym and said, oh, I'm going to go to the gym for the next week or two and do it every single day. And you might do it for a week, you might do it for 2 weeks, you might do it for a month. But there comes a point where you can't be bothered anymore, because you didn't moderate it and you didn't do it, fit it into your life sustainably. So I think that's the only way of really being successful. Because I see you drinking water the whole time and you're the only one of the three of us doing it, how important is the hydration part?
Yeah, hydration is massively important again, but I think, and this is more of a problem I had with the boys in the academy, it's something that's so easy to get right that has a direct effect on your physical and your mental performance. So I always say to them, there's no excuse to being dehydrated. I think it's the easiest thing that people can get right and tick that box, and it's completely in your hands. And but you'll be surprised how many especially, well, the boys that have poor habits in the academy, it just baffles me.
Do you have easy advice to get onto that train?
Yeah, I just don't let the water bottle leave my side, really. Just always carry a bottle with you and then fill up whenever you can, and it just becomes habit. It's creating habits. So if you always have it with you, it's always next to your bed. You wake up first thing in the morning, drink half a bottle, and then pretty much if it's glued to you, then if it's there, you're gonna take a sip. Simple as that.
It sounds so easy.
This might be the solution to get Dad to drink more water, Ollie. We might have to buy him a water bottle.
Yeah, but we'll try. We'll give him one of Mum's, because she's got loads.
Yeah, he is the absolute worst person for drinking water. And I think the four of us, TJ, there's myself and 3 siblings, so the four of us keep at him at all times, and he simply does not take it on board. He's actually
that you drink and it tells you how much you drink throughout the day.
Yeah, but he would just do it to annoy us and wouldn't drink just to annoy us. He's actually the most stubborn and annoying person in that sense.
Oh, I wonder where Soph has that from then.
Just being annoying or being stubborn.
Both.
Oh.
Also, I just wanted to have a quick chat about the sweet side of nutrition, because the sugar industry obviously has gotten huge, and there's no way in walking past it. You can see the growth in all these sweet drinks, be it any of the big makes, but also the more, I'll just call it sweet performance drinks that you can see, like a Powerade or whatever, the side of the pitches. And on top of that, sweets in general. How bad are the sweet drinks? Maybe talk a little bit about the performance drinks as well, and sweets in general. Is there sweets you can have to stay sane? And how bad are they for us?
So in terms of the sports drinks for athletes around game days, I think they're essential, really, because that is that fast releasing sugar and fuel that's going to come in handy especially like throughout the game, but in particular the second half of the game. So I'd always encourage Lucozade Sport we use, but Powerade would do the same job around match days. But then I wouldn't on non-match days, if that makes sense. So kind of keep those to match days only, because it is pure sugar. But when you're playing football, you are using that as fuel almost straight away. Again, sweets wise, how bad are they? I think sweets are one of those things, and these ultra processed, fluorescent, multicolored sweets, I think they are bad for us. I think it's one of those things that might come out down the line in years to come. I'm reading that, I don't know if you've read it, the Ultra Processed People book at the minute.
That book, yeah. I want that after.
I'm making my way through that, and it's pretty eye-opening as to the world of ultra processed food, and not just sweets, but almost everything we eat and how ultra processed it is. And again, the potential health effects this will have further down the line that are yet to be known. So again, I think going back to the everything in moderation, I think if you do have a favorite sweet, and let's for example it's, I don't know, about a bag of Haribo, and then that's your treat on a Friday or Saturday night, I wouldn't say there's anything wrong with that. I think there are healthier alternatives to sweet treats, and I think when it comes to, I think that's a big one with some athletes trying to find alternatives to their favorite chocolate bar or sweets, and not to say they can never have it, but just again for 70-80% of the week, can they find an alternative to that and then enjoy that once or twice a week? And it's getting that balance. But yeah, so I think to answer a kind of roundabout way to answer your question, how bad are sweets for us? I think they can be pretty bad, but it's how often you're consuming them which will affect that.
Okay, that's what I thought, and I think that's Soph and I spoke about that in the past. I think those are the easy things also to supplement with other stuff, be it dried fruits or nuts or whatever, and it makes a big difference quickly.
It's like finding those alternatives and also making your own sweet treats. So, like, I found a recipe online where I think it's really simple. I think it's like 8 oats, like chia seeds, nuts, bit of peanut butter, maple syrup, and like coconut oil, and then you blitz it up. You can like press them into like a little muffin tray, melt some dark chocolate and put that on top, and you've got a sweet treat that will satisfy your sweet craving, but you're also getting the extra micronutrients in there and probably getting a decent bit of energy in there as well. So you go from having a chocolate bar to having a homemade sweet treat, which is going to, again, satisfy that sweet craving. But then you know exactly what's in it. I like now being able to see exactly what is going into it. Whereas, like, if you look on the back of a protein bar, the ingredients on it is mind blowing. Like, it's really mind blowing.
And they are so easy to make with the good ingredients. Just as you said, we have these, we call them power balls, where we have dates, coconut oil. I think it's nuts in there. You blend it all together, make them in the form, put chia seeds around them. There you go. They taste great. You just have to make the effort to make them.
And I think just on those healthier sweet treats that you make at home, I think you can also get sucked into them tasting so good, and you end up eating 10. Yeah. And then you've had calories, and you put on weight, and then you wonder why you're putting on weight because you think you're. And they are healthy, but again, it's that moderation. So you can make them and have one, and that's great. But then if you have 10, then you're probably having 1,000 calories, and then you'll be questioning why you're putting on weight, even though you're eating something healthy.
But I think, Ollie, we've been very privileged growing up because Mum's very big into making everything from scratch. That's the way she grew up, and like even now, Mum's found a recipe, TJ, where she makes like something like Nutella, which is not Nutella because it's like cocoa powder and dates and nuts or whatever. We've been very privileged that Mum's always been like that, and we kind of showed interest through Mum and our little brother, the chef. So like we've had that background of, I guess, being able to find out how to make something like that. But again, it comes down to like advertising on telly, and also a lack of knowledge. And people probably don't even know that you can mix these things together and create something actually quite tasty and healthy if in moderation. I think there's just a massive issue with like the advertisement and like how readily available these unhealthy snacks are. And most of the time on the wrapper, they've got like, oh, there's milk and nuts and whatever in it. And I'm like, there's not a trace of milk in that. I can tell you that.
It's scary, the marketing and the money making. And that book I was on about, you've summed it up perfectly. There's a whole section on how companies can get away with, like, on a box of Cocoa Pops, like making it look child friendly, and it's vitamin B12 and vitamin D. So parents will look at it and go, oh, okay, cool, but they won't advertise the amount of salt and sugar. And it's just all about money making for these companies. And people I think need to be educated on the real kind of hidden truths behind all of these.
See, for me, it's not even bad if, like, I go sometimes to the shop and get a chocolate bar, but at least I know what to put my body on. I know it's rubbish, but in that moment I want it. But I think it's the overall knowledge of actually what you're putting in your body, because I definitely don't believe I'm putting milk and nuts in my body right now.
I think there's another point we need to discuss, and we shouldn't go too long so the episode doesn't explode in length, but we talk about being readily available, but also price. And if you look at the new type of power bars, they're really expensive. But if we look at a pack of Haribo, they're dead cheap. And it's sometimes cheaper than buying an apple or whatever. So I'll just formulate it into one question. Does healthy nutrition have to be expensive?
No, I don't think it has to be expensive. I think
or is it expensive?
I think it's. I don't think it has to be expensive. I think it can be if you really want to go for your go organic and things like that. But I think I think it's more of a convenience and effort thing for a lot of people. I think if you can buy something and put it in the microwave or put it in the oven or the air fryer and it be ready in 5-10 minutes versus taking the extra 10, 15, 20 minutes to do the prep. And I get that'll be difficult for some people that may, work jobs, have, again, for these parents that take their boys to academy football, that will come from work, pick them up from school, drive them to the academy, then have to sit around for a few hours and then get home at 9:00. It is difficult, but then I just think it just can be done. It just might take a bit more preparation and planning ahead. So can you meal prep? Can you cook in batch and then box up? And I think there's ways around it. I just think it might take a bit more time and effort. I don't think it necessarily has to cost a whole lot more. It's definitely worth that time and effort. And I think once people are educated on the importance of it, then that's when, people might appreciate that more.
I agree. It's what you see when you walk through a supermarket and you see people being really busy and running around and then putting in the white bread, putting in the chocolate and putting in the I don't know, chocolate yogurts or whatever. And you hardly, I think it's become something very normal. You hardly see anybody going to the tray to the cash desk and only having vegetables and so on in the basket. It's very rarely that you see that.
Yeah, I think so. It's sad, but I think hopefully I don't know what the solution is really to the general population. I'd like to think with athletes there is starting to be more nutrition support, which will help educate and inform them, and in academy level to help inform the parents. But I think there's so much more to be. It's got such a long way to go. Like I said, like when you see sports science and analysis and psychology having bigger departments and teams, and then nutrition being solo, I think there is a long way to go. But I think if you can get to a point where we have, for example, a full-time with the WSL team, maybe a part-time or full-time with the women's academy, because I think that's an area that is so important, that isn't targeted at all at the minute. and then a full time with the boys' academy, or probably 2 with the younger age groups and the older age groups. So there's a long way to go, but I think it just needs to come from the top, and I think there needs to be some more value shown from higher ups.
So if you don't have any more questions, I'd have a question for you and then a question for TJ to round it off. Let's ask you first, what is your top advice or your 3 key takeaways on the topic of nutrition for you as a professional footballer?
The biggest thing I live by is I feel I don't diet. That is the biggest thing I live by. I think everything in moderation, because otherwise I would not be able to sustain what I do. And I think that, and I know I'm repeating myself in terms of fueling, but the biggest thing I've learned from working with TJ is the match day -1 fueling, and I've mentioned that before in an episode, is I had never focused on that as much as we did, and I absolutely felt a change in my performance.
And TJ, do you have maybe 3 or a key takeaway or advice for listeners?
Key takeaways, advice, listeners. I would say, I definitely would kind of talk about the balance, and there isn't a right or wrong diet, or don't get caught up in this is bad for me, this is good for me, this is right, this is wrong. I think if you get the balance between kind of generally this 80-20 approach. So if 80% of the time you're eating well, you're eating healthy, and then you allow this 20% of the time to kind of relax and switch off, I think it's a good way to go about it. Obviously, kind of talking about this in an athlete sense, but I think it can apply to you as well, like the general population. I think it's also finding food that works for you, and also that healthy food doesn't have to be vegetables and salads, and it doesn't have to be miserable. You can eat healthy, and you can eat well while it being tasty. And I think, it doesn't have to be time consuming as well. It's just finding what works for you, finding some easy recipes, start experimenting with cooking, and you'll just kind of soon realize how easy cooking and food can be. And I think once you start to enjoy eating and try different foods, it can go a long way. I think people that don't like food or don't appreciate food, it can be a lot more of a chore. And then think when it's a chore, then you can then people go into what's convenient rather than what's probably best for them.
And at the end, how rewarding the effort can be. Exactly.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed this episode. I've learned a lot. Thank you very much, TJ. There's not much more I can say. Thank you for coming on. All the best and good luck in Doha.
Thank you.
And we'd like an update.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, from my side as well, TJ. Thanks for coming on. I've been nagging you for quite a while now, so we finally got it going. But not only thanks for coming on the episode, I think thanks for all the support you've given us as a team throughout the season and a half, and all the best in Doha. I'm pretty sure I'll see you again at some point.
Yeah, no, definitely. No, thanks for having me on. Enjoyed the chat. Sorry I've waffled on a bit at certain points, but no, I really enjoyed it.
Great. Then thank you very much, everyone, and see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.